Peru is one of those destinations that makes a lot of people's bucket lists, and in addition, visiting Machu Picchu. Recently, we published the third in a three-part series of articles about visiting Peru and Machu Picchu and the dining scene there, written by, full disclosure, my husband, Jimmy McDonough, who is also our eco-friendly food, travel, and adventure editor. I'm Courtney Drake McDonough. I'm the publisher and managing editor of RealFoodTraveler.com, a digital culinary travel magazine, and the host of the Real Food Traveler podcast. So my guest today, kind of oddly, is my husband, Jimmy, who has written these three articles that we've published over time, and they've been very popular on the website. And I thought it would be fun to actually talk to him about his experiences in Peru and get a little taste of these three articles. Of course, we want you to go to the website and read them in their entirety, but this will serve as some helpful information for those just listening to this podcast. So, Jimmy, welcome to the Real Food Traveler podcast.
Yeah, thanks, sweetie. Oh, can I say that?
Yes.
Courtney?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking me to do this, and I'm really happy to do it because I just had an incredible experience in Peru, and I would love to share that with our followers and listeners and help them get the most out of that travel opportunity if it's on their list of places to visit.
Well, I will start by saying you're the only podcast guest that I will ever allow to call me sweetie,
Okay.
but that's okay. So let's start with the big picture of the circumstances under which you went to Peru.
Yeah, it was a special set of circumstances. So I am fortunate that I have three sisters who I love dearly, and we're quite close. And so we have a little bit of a tradition of celebrating big birthdays together. And our eldest sister, Gloria, she turned 65. And on her bucket list was a trip to Peru and Machu Picchu in particular. And so she, about a good year in advance, she rounded us all up and started talking about doing this trip, and that she was going to do the hard work of planning, the advanced planning, coming up with the itinerary, and the rest of us, said we're in. And so together we planned it. Although really, Glorianne really was the head on, took the lead, I should say, on setting the itinerary, doing all the research, and did an amazing job. And of course, one of my tips actually is if you're traveling, if you want to travel to Peru, that you really do take a good deal of time in advance to plan your itinerary and research the locations and the accommodations and the culture and transportation and all sorts of other things, because Peru is a wonderful place to visit. And if you're going it on your own as compared to an organized trip, there really is a lot for you to think about and to figure out in advance to make your trip successful. So that was the origin story of our adventure in Peru. Was really a sibling adventure together to celebrate one of our big birthdays.
That's wonderful, and I know a lot of people have been surprised when they heard that you went on this big trip with your siblings, but you're fortunate enough to have a really good relationship with them and to want to spend that much time together, so that was great. You mentioned preparing in advance. Tell us from that article, which is entitled, so that you can find it on the website, Travel to Peru, Tips and Recommendations. Tell us a few of your top tips from that article.
Sure. So I think I already kind of tipped my hat on the first one, which is do a lot of advanced preparation. And just an example of that is that if you want to visit Machu Picchu, for example, well, Machu Picchu is one of those bucket list places for pretty much everyone in the world. And so there are a lot of people that want to go there, and you have to you have to reserve a date and time to visit the place. And there are certain periods of the year that are very busy and others not so much. And so you want to make sure that you are looking ahead and finding those dates that will match up with your plans, so that you don't end up going to Peru and you show up and you can't get in because you don't have a reservation. So that would be honestly my first tip right away, is to do that advanced planning. And another one is thinking in advance, is learn some Spanish. Absolutely. It's in the big city of Lima, for example, where we were visiting, and some of the bigger tourist locations. There are folks who get by, locals who will get by with English and do very well. But if you're venturing off the path a little bit and you're dealing with interacting with locals, it really does help to have some Spanish under your belt. And so, a learned language takes time. So some advanced planning there, I would highly recommend as well. Getting around Peru isn't that hard. However, driving is pretty scary and iffy. And if you love, kind of white knuckle driving, and if you're used to really congested areas and some pretty wild and crazy roads, maybe you could get by. But frankly, I would recommend not doing that, hiring a driver for when you're getting out of the city of Lima, for example, or getting out of major tourist areas, to hire a local driver as well as a potential guide for a day, for example. They can help you make the most of your time and not have to be worrying so much about avoiding the crazy busy roads and frankly, some of the infrastructure issues. Some of the roads aren't that good. So I would definitely recommend that. Let's see here. I would suggest as well, certainly basics like your clothing. The climate there is variable. In Lima, you're at sea level, and the mornings are very cool and foggy, and then it warms up and it stays gray all day, but it's boiling hot. And we were there in their winter in June. So remember, it's in the southern hemisphere. So it's kind of the seasons are reversed. And so we were there in winter and it was still quite hot, even though the skies were gray in Lima. And then when we went to Machu Picchu and Cusco, they're at incredibly high elevations, and the skies were clearer, but they would also get quite hot. The mornings were cool, but the afternoons would get very hot. So dress in layers, I would suggest. And just be aware that thinking of the topography, that when you are visiting these high places like Cusco's at 11,000 feet above sea level, that's incredibly high. And so definitely in advance, start, frankly, doing a little more exercise, perhaps, if you're not used to that kind of altitude and you want to be walking through the cobblestone streets and going up the passageways at Machu Picchu, you definitely want to be ready for that physically. You don't want to show up and then you get altitude sickness, or you just physically don't have the stamina, because it is challenging. And I'm from Colorado. I'm a Colorado boy, and I like to hike. And I tell you, it was a bit of a workout, even just visiting these places. So definitely be aware of those advanced issues. And another thing about your clothing is good shoes. By all means, invest in a good pair of walking shoes, because you'll be walking in the towns, you'll be walking on cobblestones, very smooth, rough surfaces. And then when you're visiting the archaeological sites, you're going to have very rough trail conditions there, Machu Picchu and the others. So you definitely don't want to be showing up with flip-flops or very pretty but not practical shoes. So I would definitely encourage you to think about those basics for packing in advance. And goodness, I would say I have lots more in the article to share with you, but I think those are some in advance for you to be thinking about. So when you're planning your trip, there's frankly, it's very different, I would say, than planning a trip to Europe. At least most places in Europe. Unless you're going to be hiking the Alps, the back country of the Alps, you need to be ready for a little bit more physically demanding environment, and that takes some advanced preparation for sure.
Well, and that leads right into your next article, talking about physically demanding, is your article about Machu Picchu. Tips on that, because that was a big part of your trip, something you'd really looked forward to. Of course, people don't go to Peru and not go to Machu Picchu. So it was worth you devoting an entire article to. So let's talk about that a little.
So as I mentioned earlier, that was sort of the bucket list destination for certainly our eldest sister, Gloria, but frankly for probably all of us as well. And that does take advanced preparation on its own, as I said, in terms of getting the admission tickets in advance, but also making your way there. So there's quite a few steps to that. In our case, for example, we flew into Lima. We flew Lima to Cusco and then took a train. We ended up in the town of, well, it has many names, Agua Caliente, as well as the town of Machu Picchu. And that is a small, very much touristy town close by Machu Picchu. And it has lots of accommodations and very much geared towards the traveler, lots of places to dine, lots of places to shop. It's actually quite picturesque, the little village there. It's right by this rushing river that unfortunately sometimes floods, but it was lovely when we were there. We actually enjoyed it. And there are some hot springs there. That's why part of it's called, or one of the names is Aguas Caliente. So you can actually partake in the hot water springs as well. So visiting Machu Picchu in and of itself is an adventure. So definitely plan for that in advance. Plan on how to get there and the time of year. Have your entrance tickets. Another thing is that there are only certain ways that you can get from actually to the gates of Machu Picchu. And so, for example, from the town of Machu Picchu to the gates of the archaeological site, you do need to take a bus. And so you need to reserve that and make sure that you have that set up as well. I suppose there could be other ways. I'm not aware of them, but we did reserve a place on a bus that takes you there. By the way, there are those really hardy souls who hike to Machu Picchu. And kudos to them, because that is a very rugged trail. And we did speak to some folks who did it, and it was very demanding and very rugged. And that was not for us, for this sibling trip. So, but do be aware that there are possibilities there if you're interested in doing that. But that's not how we did it. So again, advanced preparation, really kind of plan all of that out. Don't leave it to the last minute is my word of encouragement there, so that you minimize frustration and you maximize the time that you actually have. Now, at Machu Picchu, the site itself, it was actually fairly busy. It wasn't tremendously busy, but it was quite busy. Again, we were there in June of 2023, which is kind of their winter. And we did arrange to be there early in the day. So that's another tip. Get to Machu Picchu as early in the day as you possibly can for a host of reasons. It's cooler, the crowds are less, and it does give you plenty of time to explore, rest, and explore some more. One thing about Machu Picchu that just blew me away was how enormous the archaeological site is. It is incredible, and there are multiple parts to it that you can visit. It's not just a contained one small area. It rambles and goes even to additional mountain peaks nearby that you can hike to. But you do need to have tickets to go to the different locations, so be aware of that. It's not like they might have a ticket for all parts of it. What I saw were you had to purchase separate tickets for each section that you wanted to go to. And it is so awe-inspiring. You really do want to allow yourself time to just absorb it and really take it all in, because it is an incredible sight. It far exceeded my expectations. Another tip for you is, and I guess this could be a tip for getting prepared in advance, is to do some research in advance, get a good guidebook, read up on Machu Picchu, so that when you arrive there, you have something to go by. Because when you get there, there are no signs. There are not interpretive signs everywhere explaining what you're seeing. There might have been a couple, but I really am hard-pressed to remember any. When you arrive there at the gates, they do have a lot of fellas who offer their services to be your guide for the day. Now, that may or may not work for you. We chose not to do that on our trip. And the reason was that we had done some research in advance. We had briefed ourselves. And frankly, we just wanted, my sisters and I, we love the freedom of doing what we want to do and spending as much time in certain places as we like and not being told where to go and, and how long. So we really wanted to have a loosey-goosey kind of experience. I do wish that I had read up a little bit more in advance. So if you do the self-guided tour option, by all means, make sure you have done your research in advance and as well maybe have a guidebook with you while you're there, because so many questions will pop into your head, even more than perhaps in advance you're thinking of as you survey the incredible site of Machu Picchu. Some oddball things at Machu Picchu that I'd give you a heads up on is so you cannot take food once you enter Machu Picchu, the archaeological site. You cannot take food into there and, like, for example, have a picnic. I kind of assumed you could take some snacks in and have a picnic because it's such an enormous area and there's areas that, like, with grass that seem perfect for picnicking, but that is not allowed. They also do not have bathrooms in Machu Picchu. So if you have to go to the bathroom, you really better go before you enter. So you got to really time your, your biological clock, as it were, to take care of business before you enter the gates and go into Machu Picchu. Because once you get in there and you're wandering around for hours through this enormous site, trust me, it can be a challenge in terms of, are you hungry and do you need to go to the bathroom? So those were some surprises, and goodness, I could go on and on and on, but I won't, because again, we have the article that lists all sorts of tips. And one of the highlights of our time in Machu Picchu, beyond just the incredible awe-inspiring archaeological site, was a lunch we had there. But I think that might be a good way to segue to our next article, right?
For sure. So before we talk about the dining scene there, this is a good time for me to remind our listeners and our readers that this is what Real Food Traveler is all about, not only informing and enticing people about travel opportunities, but also encouraging them to eat local wherever they go, which includes getting to know the people behind the food, some of the ingredients, the history of it, as well as what's new and amazing. So you experienced a little bit of all of that in Peru because you gotta eat when you travel. So you had some wonderful meals.
Sure. Yeah, the food was spectacular, delicious, so vibrant and fresh, and again, so surprising. I certainly, before going to Peru, I have heard of the cuisine. I've heard of some of the top restaurateurs and restaurants in the world being located there, and I guess I just didn't expect it to show up in areas and in ways that were more accessible to the average person. And one thing is that, at least again in terms of an American traveler as of June 2023, when we traveled there, the dollar went a long way. And so for relatively little, we were able to eat like royalty and just have amazing experiences. And so I just mentioned, for example, at Machu Picchu. So when we had our fill of climbing up and exploring Machu Picchu, the trails and the ruins and just taking in the ambiance and the incredible Andes, jagged mountains, all about, we left and were starving, ravenous. And at the top there, at the entrance, we wanted to take advantage of what was there. And basically there were two options. One was sort of a quick serve countertop. And then the other, there is a hotel there right at the gates of Machu Picchu. And so in there's a few options, but one of them included a buffet, sort of all-you-can-eat buffet. And it was For Peruvian standards, it was pricey, and for our standards, it was a little bit higher than we normally would have paid for. I would say it was probably somewhere between $40 and $50 each. So, not dirt cheap at all, but it was terrific and it was worth every penny. It was a beautiful dining space. It had terrific food, different food stations. It was just a wonderful place to recover from our time in Machu Picchu, and the four of us lingered and we enjoyed just a very long, leisurely lunch, talking, laughing, rehydrating, enjoying some good food, and just the lovely environment. So you could, I suppose, if you weren't as ravenous as we were, you could either again take that quick serve option at the counter, or wait till your bus returns back to the town of Machu Picchu, Aguascalientes. I say that buffet at the hotel was really quite special, and we have some great memories of that. So other memories of cuisine there in Peru, on the very first day of our trip, the very first full day of our trip, we were in Lima. And we went to this place that was a street side cafe called LA 73. And it was in this incredible, hip, fashionable area called Barranco. It's the Barrio of Barranco in Lima. The food there was just a knockout. So when hopefully our listeners go in and check out the article, they'll see the pictures of the incredible foods and beverages that we enjoyed there. We just found ourselves really happy to hang out there as well and have some drinks and just enjoy the street life that was in Lima, in that neighborhood. That was terrific. I'll save the very best dining experience for last. And so, again, my article describes a variety of experiences. I do want to mention that throughout Peru, there are many street food vendors. There are many markets where they have really just mom and pop-up food vending opportunities. And so those are prolific. And sometimes all they do is make fresh squeezed juice. Or another one I'll never forget was a cane sugar. So they had these long stalks of sugar cane, and they were squeezing it on the spot and coming up with this incredibly sweet nectar. Others were frying in just the most rudimentary equipment. They were frying up, this and that. And one of the things that's Peru is known for is cuy, and that's the Peruvian word for guinea pig. And so I actually never partook in that. But if someone else is braver than me, that's something that you could get on the street. But also patatas or potatoes. Potatoes come from Peru. And so there's an incredible array and variety that you see in the markets. And they do certainly create a lot of fried potatoes, potato mash, lots of different potato dishes that you can take. There is such an incredible street food environment. It's very family, has a very family feel to it, very simple family feel. I'll never forget in Cusco at night, the night market there, where there are these very small scale mom and pop types of pop-up food vendors, and they would have like buckets turned over for their patrons to sit on and eat. So the patrons would get their food right off of the grill. Sometimes it's grilled, sometimes it's deep fried, and they would serve it up and hand it over to their patrons who were regulars, and they would just sit there and eat, and they would talk together with their family, their friends, or maybe the food vendor themselves. So there was a very familial feel to it all. It was incredible, very intimate, even though you're on a street in the wide open. It was a very sweet sort of experience to observe. So the highlight of our culinary adventures in Peru, honestly, was the meal that we had at Morena in Cusco. And this is a spot that one of my sisters, Jamie. So she was terrific at helping us find and plan for places to go to have meals. Morena was just such a memorable meal. The space, when we walked up the stairs, we were called after a short wait. We walked up the stairs, and there's a beautiful, airy loft with wonderful modern interpretations of traditional Peruvian arts, and then these huge windows overlooking the plaza of Cusco, and the sky was blue and the wind was blowing, and this amazing flag for the region was flapping in the wind, and their flag looks like the pride flag. It's multiple colors in this region. And so it was just so vivid and vibrant, the colors, the energy. And because in the plaza there's cathedrals and sculptures and flowers and people milling about, and this enormous colorful flag. It was just amazing. So that set the backdrop, and we had this amazing meal together. Again, we lingered and enjoyed, and the service staff was phenomenal, and they were so just kind and generous and made us feel welcome, and smiles all around. It was a terrific experience, and that brings to mind the Peruvian people that we encountered, and just how just kind and sweet and friendly and open they were on the streets, in the villages, in the restaurants, in the cafes, on the historical sites. Just a terrific, memorable people there in Peruvians. Really very special. The culture, all of it just is so unique and impactful in all of my travels. It was one of those places that I'll definitely never forget and hope I can come back to at some point. So there's lots more in the article, including the history of potatoes and the Incan connection. So by all means, I hope our listeners can have a look there. And there's also more description of another incredible restaurant in Lima on our last day that was really a jaw-dropping environment. So check out that article.
You've painted quite the picture of visiting Peru, and only to be matched by the really wonderful photos you took. In fact, you had so many photos, I put them in collages on the site because I didn't want our readers to miss out on seeing any of these gorgeous, colorful meals and just beautiful things that you were seeing there. So yes, definitely I encourage podcast listeners to go to realfoodtraveler.com, where you'll find all of these articles. We'll have them linked here on the podcast, but they're definitely all on the site, and as well as literally a world of other articles written by us and by a lot of wonderful travel journalists who contribute to the site. And there's just so much to learn and experience and get tips from and get a taste of, literally and figuratively, of all the culinary experiences to have around the world when we travel. So thank you, Jimmy, for being my guest today and for all the great work you do as one of our editors and co-owner of realfoodtraveler.com. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope that our podcast listeners have gained some wonderful tips for visiting Peru and are as enticed as Jimmy was to go and make it happen.
Please do. Please make it happen. If you have any interest at all, make it happen.
So the Real Food Traveler podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, Overcast, and a whole bunch of different streaming services. And so if you're a podcast listener, we're probably there. So just look for the Real Food Traveler podcast and tell your friends who love to travel and who love to eat. And we will see you next time.